Okay, ladies, we're going to get started. We're going to talk about Yocheved today. Yocheved was the daughter of Levi and the granddaughter of Yaakov. One of the three women who is mentioned specifically in the pasuk as being gone as part of the people who went down to Egypt. And in fact, it is commonly assumed that she is the 70th person mentioned in the Pasukim as completing the count, and that she was born at the gates to Egypt. So this is about Yocheved. Okay, so we're talking about Yocheved. She's daughter of Levi, granddaughter of Yaakov. She's the 70th person to complete the count by most Meforshim. All right. Okay. So according to the Seder Olam, based on the Gemara, not only did she go down to Egypt, but she also left Egypt. Okay, got that? So the Gemara and Baba Basra brings proof that not only was Yocheved born in Egypt, she was conceived on the way. They kind of bring proof. I wouldn't say it's the actual proof, but instead, in the name of Rabbi Chama bar Rabbi Chanina, that this is Yocheved was conceived along the way and born at the gates. Yet the trip didn't take them 9 months. So we don't really understand what they're talking about because the tribes were going back and forth all the time. So there's no way this trip took them 9 months, even if they brought their wives and children and their cattle along. It still wasn't 9 months, but anyways, this is what they say. So Rashi basically explains that she was conceived later and she was born at the gates, but Chazal, that she was conceived earlier, and born at the gates. So yeah, she was either conceived before they left for Egypt, or she was born in Egypt proper and not just at the gates. Kind of depends who you want to hold by. Most people hold by Rashi that she was born at the gates and she was just conceived earlier, and the Gemara is just bringing it for some other reason. We can explain the Gemara with the following idea. In times of danger, during famines, wars, etc., the Jewish people in general stop having children if other Jews are in danger. At least back then they did. We learned this from Yosef. Yosef only had 2 children because he knew there was a famine coming and he didn't know how his brothers and father were faring back in Eretz Yisrael. So he only had 2 children during those 7 years of plenty. He stopped having children in order to show us that we have to care for our fellow Jews and we shouldn't be doing things when they might be in danger. All right. Yeah. But the truth is that Yaakov and his family were not actually affected by the famine. They were doing just fine, but because they were worried about iron, Yaakov sent his sons down to Egypt to get food. He didn't want because people see that they had plenty, but other people were starving. But the brothers, according to the unfortunately, they had food and they didn't actually. But the brothers didn't know that Yosef was alive. They said he was dead, so they continued having children. And therefore, Yocheved was already conceived along the way. If you want to go with the idea that maybe they thought he was still alive, and therefore they also didn't have children, and therefore she was conceived along the way. Could be one explanation. I said that she was the first child conceived after the break that they might have been instituted because Yosef might have been alive. And she was the first child born after this break, but there's no proof of that. It's just my way of explaining the Gemara. Called Yocheved because her face had a on Bereishit. Ziv Hakavot, it says. Yeah. Hakavot. According to Robertson Heller's book, Woman in Tanakh, I think it's called Mirrors, Divine Mirrors or something. Her name is a contraction in the 2 phrases. She brings in that Yod and Vav are one phrase, and Kavod is the second. Yod and Vav are letters of Hashem's name, And the Yod is used to symbolize divine wisdom. Yod points both upwards and downwards to show that the divine wisdom is above reality, but it can still be drawn down to this world. Basically, while Hashem is above everything, we can still take his wisdom and bring it down to us, right? And that's what the Vav shows. The Vav is an elongated Yud to show us that we're planted in this world, but we still can reach the higher levels and bring it down and connect it. One word kavod means honor, specifically honoring Hashem. It also has the same gematria of the word lev, heart, because Hashem is the heart of everything. Yocheved was able to see and put into practice divine wisdom of kavod and heart. Okay, we see this in how Yocheved deals with life. Yocheved was 125 when she had Miriam. So she was 127, 128 when she had Aaron, who was 2, and Miriam was 5. And Moshe was born when she was 130, after Amram divorced her and then took her back. Okay, she doesn't complain throughout this saga. She's been in Egypt her whole life. She's raised there. She's born there. She doesn't complain. And she becomes the wife of the Gadol. Like, she obviously had some very special wisdom going on. Pharaoh tells her to kill the baby boys. She refuses. She doesn't refuse outright. She kind of
What did he say?
kill the baby boys, the Jewish baby boys. She doesn't refuse outright. She's a little smarter than that. She pretends to agree and isn't going to go along with it. Miriam, on the other hand, outright refuses and yells at Paro, and Paro says, I'm going to kill her, and Yocheved begs for her daughter's life and succeeds getting Miriam not to be killed. Yocheved's whole life is really about tefillah and bringing Hashem wisdom and honor into this world, and we'll see this as we continue to explore what her life is all about. Okay, so
Before she married
Amram. Before she married Amram, she was the daughter of Levi. He was her nephew, actually. He was the son of Kahath.
Okay, so he was a grandson of Levi. She was a daughter. This is no longer permissible.
A little bit later. Okay. That's what the relationship was before. So Yocheved was the daughter of Levi. Amram was actually the grandson of Levi. And that's a relationship that is no longer allowed today. Okay. So she isn't just the wife of Gadol Amram. She's also the premier Jewish midwife, known as Shifra. Why Shifra? Chazal explained it's because she used to clean and beautify the babies. She would stain them with food and water when they were hidden. Okay. Rosenheld brings another idea connected to Shifra in that she would daven before and after every birth that both mother and child should be healthy and have no complications. Why did she do this? She was terrified that if even one child died under her watch, she would be blamed because of Paro's decree. Okay, so Paro ordered Shifra who to kill the Jewish male babies. We know this story, right? He calls Jewish midwives and says, you must kill all the male Jewish babies. He doesn't want the Redeemer to be born, right? And this is how he tries to go back. We know this didn't happen, but did you know that Paro taught them how to tell if it's going to be a boy or a girl?
Before the birth?
As the birth is happening. He said to them, boys are born facing downwards and girls are born facing upwards. It doesn't really happen today. And there's whole discussion in Gemara of why not. Nature changes, we're on the level, whatever. I didn't get into it because it wasn't really so relevant, but it's brought in Gemara in the name of Rabbi Chanina that he told the Jewish midwives this. So why does he care not to tell them how they're going to be born? What does it matter to him if he kill them afterwards or whatnot? He didn't want the people to rebel. Later on, the decree expands to also the Egyptians, because the astrologers get confused because Moshe is raised by an Egyptian, even though he's Jewish, so they can't tell from the stars, is he Egyptian, is he Jewish? So he orders that all the male babies in Egypt that are born should be killed and thrown into the Nile, murdered, whatever, done. He's not interested in having this Redeemer born. Obviously, he doesn't get his way, but he tried. So he figures the baby was considered to be stillborn, the people wouldn't rebel. We all know that statistically there's a number of babies that die either in utero or as they're being born and they're considered stillborn. So during Egyptian times, this didn't really seem to happen because of Shiphrah's tefillas. But he wasn't really interested in babies being murdered outright because he didn't want a full-scale rebellion on his hands.
Do you know how long before the birth of Moshe Rabbeinu the
This is
decree was?
taking place. It doesn't really, it's complicated because Amram divorces her when the decree takes place, but I'm not sure exactly when that happened in the time of the decree.
Oh.
It doesn't explain outright if it happened straight away, if it happened later, as the decree got more serious, because at first it was just he ordered the midwives to do it, and then he ordered his soldiers to do it. So I'm not sure exactly when in the process Amram decided that we shouldn't be with our wives anymore. So if you're wondering who it was, the most common explanation is that it was Miriam, but there is another explanation brought down by Chazal that it was Elisheva ben Aminadab.
So what?
That Pua was Elisheva ben Aminadab, her daughter-in-law. And they say that Aaron was already married at this point, even though he was only 2 years old. Why marry off a 2-year-old?
Who's daughter?
Yocheved and Amram. Elisheva married Aaron.
Ah, no, I got that issue. Okay.
Elisheva ben Aminadab.
I mean, who said she was married?
The Gemara says that Aaron was married to Elisheva, that it was her daughter-in-law. They specifically state that her daughter-in-law was Pua. And at this point, right, Moshe is not born, so it has to be Elisheva who's married to Aaron. And I said, well, maybe they're just, my husband said, no, it says that he was married.
Okay, so like we
Yeah,
the other direction.
exactly.
Little girl and 3 guys.
And apparently there's also
married
some,
is,
Makor, Yaakov also found wives for Peretz and his brother when they were very young as well. So
Yeah, in later generations, sometimes there was things like people that came out of the people grew up and
right.
they weren't really married, but they were like, they became part of their family.
Right. I mean, there's all the contracts because he was talked about this a lot. But anyways, so I just found it interesting that, he's married at 2 and already, Elisheva is already considered the daughter-in-law. But anyways, it's one explanation. But the other explanation is that Elisheva also acted as a midwife. There's more than 2 midwives. And Elisheva was also one of them. It's just that there is this Gemara that says that Pua was her daughter-in-law, Elisheva. So just an idea.
She could be 20 and he was 2 and they're
Yeah.
waiting for him to grow up,
Who knows? I don't know how old. Yeah.
Who knows how much older than her husband.
Yeah, I don't know how old Elisheva was. But anyway, so she's considered by one explanation to be Pua. The most common, obviously, is that it was Miriam, but there is this explanation it was Elisheva. But the Gemara asks, there's a discussion between Rav and Shmuel on this. Who brings a 5-year-old to birth? Like, it's not really considered appropriate, right? You most likely don't want a 5-year-old while you're giving birth. I mean,
How she could help.
right. So they say she was just there to, observe, kind of help as much as possible, but really she couldn't do much. Okay, but they're not usually attending your birth. Anyways, so I said the answer to the first question is really, Miriam wasn't like other 5-year-olds. She had Nebuah, she had Ruach HaKodesh, she was quite wise and loyal in her ways, and she was very outspoken. She really didn't care what other people thought, as we see with the story with Parah, which we'll get into when we do Miriam.
How old was she when she told her father that you
5. She was a leader and she was quite fiercely loyal, like her grandfather Levi. There's a whole idea on Levi that I saw that Levi was considered to be the most loyal of all the tribes, which is why he sat and learned and passed on the Masorah when other tribes went out to work. I didn't really get into it because the story is about Yocheved. Yeah. Yeah, so I guess it's her grandfather on her mother's side, great grandfather on her father's side, but Levi was her ancestor, right? So it's Vilna Gaon who brings down that it wasn't just Shifra and Pua acted as midwives, but that there were others as well, based on the way they said it. There was one and there was two. It wasn't just like there was only one and two. It made it seem like there'd be more, which kind of makes sense considering that the Jewish women were having 6 babies at a time. I can't imagine that Shifra and Pua were able to attend every single birth. So, and Sanford and Elisheva also acted as a midwife. When Paro complained to Shifra and Pua that they weren't doing as he ordered them to, they said, Yocheved said back to him, as Shifra, that the Jewish women don't need our help. We're only called after they give birth. They're like chayos. And we kind of assume that's a bad thing, but here it's actually not such a bad thing. So how do they explain this to Paro? They told Paro that like Yehuda was likened to a lion, Binyamin to a wolf, Naphtali to a deer, Yisachar to a donkey, Dan to a snake, Yosef to a bull. So too, the following generations have the same kohos in them that they're able to give birth without any help. And the rest of the tribes apparently are likened to lion cubs according to this idea. So they said, just like our ancestors were blessed with animal-like qualities, so too does this generation. Therefore, we're only called after the birth to check the mother. And obviously they were there to check the baby also, but then begs the question, why did it matter to Paro, right? That, if they're only called after the birth, who cares? Kill the babies anyway. It goes back to the fact that he didn't want a full-scale rebellion. So, as I said earlier, Shifra davened copiously. She davened all the time. She was terrified of being blamed for a single death. So she went above and beyond. She davened before, after, during. No mother, no child, no one should be harmed during the process. And we see that the woman in Egypt didn't suffer from birth pains like the curse of Chava. They were considered a righteous woman. And basically, Representative Heller basically says that she went above and beyond, as does Rashi. They went back many times to the homes of these women who given birth to check on the women and the babies, to bring them food, water, make sure that they had everything they needed, especially because they went into hiding, basically. Okay, it's also a Rashi. So now we get to Amram decides to divorce his wife. He says, we're toiling in vain. Why should we be married? They already had 2 children. Well, he was done. He was frustrated with the process. He didn't want his children to be killed. He made this decision to divorce his wife. So the following is brought down in the Gemara Sota. And man went in the house of Levi. Where did he go? Rabbi Yehuda bar Zvina said he went according to the advice of his daughter. It was taught Amram was the gadol door, since Paro said also Amram. Since Paro said all sons that are born send them into the river, he said we work in vain. He stood and divorced his wife. Everyone stood and divorced their wives. Then Miriam comes and says, what you're doing is wrong. But we have a question here. How can he divorce his wife? What about the commitment to have children for a root, right? So we know he had children. What about the rest of the generation? He is the gadol door. They're all falling in his name. So maybe only those who had already fulfilled the commandment got divorced. And we can see this maybe from a very strange Targum understand that most people say there's no basis to, but it is brought down. And some people say it's because our Targum understand got messed up. It was a written down thing in many different versions over the years, but I'll tell you what it says and you can all decide what to do with it. All right. It says Amram divorced Yocheved. She married a man named Parach and had 2 children with him, Eldad and Medad. According to Targum, we understand this all took place before Moshe was born. So according to this idea, only those who not yet fulfilled their obligation to have children married. Now the Chida comes and says, don't believe the Targum understand. This is baseless. I don't know where he's getting this from. This is not true. All right, and this is where he says, there's a lot of different versions of Targum understand, and there's something got messed up along the way. Don't put any basis into this Torah.
Who said that?
The Chida. To say that she had Eldad made up before she had Moshe, because the Gemara says that she was 3 months pregnant at the time that Amram divorced her with Moshe. So it's slightly impossible for her to have had 2 children with someone else when she was 3 months pregnant with Moshe. When Amram divorced her,
She was already,
already 3 months pregnant with Moshe, according to Moshe portion. According to the Gemara, the Gemara brings it down that she was 3 months pregnant with Moshe. She already conceived the Redeemer. Rather, we're going to get this. Rather believe that Eldad and Medad are from Amram. And how do we see that? According to the Das Kingdom,
Eldad made out from where?
Amram. According to the Das Kingdom, Amram left Yocheved when they received the Torah because she was his aunt. As we said, this is a forbidden relationship. Aunt and nephew are not allowed to be married.
That was later.
Later. Okay?
Yeah.
All right. He was only allowed to take her back because once the nation converted, they were no longer considered related. So they got new names, they're no longer considered related. And it was at this point that Amram got remarried, Eldad and Medad. Eldad name comes from El David, and there's a tombstone somewhere in Israel on their grave. It says Eldad and Medad, brothers of Aaron, from their father.
Was the mother?
Sorry. There is something in Eldad and Medad that he says they're from Parnach, this and that, but
That there was?
from Parnach. I don't know. It's before Shem. This is, but apparently there's a grave somewhere here in Eretz Yisrael because they lived in past Yeshua when they were conquering the land. And it says on Eldad's tombstone that he is from Amram, brother of Aaron, from his brother. Okay?
What was the thing to do? They became the being.
מתנבאים במחנה.
What did they say?
I don't remember
I
the
can't
prophecy.
remember.
When was that? Why was it?
I think it was sometime around when breaking Shabbos, and I think it was around that time when the man who broke Shabbos, and they didn't know what to do with him. Moshe couldn't remember, and they prophesied in camp in front of their teacher, Moshe. But they were right to do so. It's a whole thing.
So we only know essentially good things about.
Yeah, they're not mentioned a whole lot. They're mentioned in, Parshas there, although they made that prophesied in the camp in front of their teacher, Moshe. All right, so Miriam then comes to her father, Amram, and says, your decree is worse than Paro's, as Paro only decreed on the boys, and you decreed on the boys and girls. Paro also only decreed in this world, and you decreed in this world of the next. What does that mean? When my husband sent this to me, I was like, what does that mean on this world of the next? So they bring down that even if the children only lived for a few seconds, they would still be Zoka to Olam. There is a discussion in the Gemara at what point a fetus is, going to go into Olam, but there's a certain point in the pregnancy, that they are considered to be having a Shema, and at the point they would go into Olam, but if you lose them, even if they weren't born, if you miscarried. So I didn't get into that because just a whole long complicated thing, but there is that discussion.
Everybody agrees that once they're born, even
Yes. But when they're fetuses, there's a discussion on at what point. The wicked Pharaoh, maybe his decree will be fulfilled, maybe not. You who are righteous, certainly your decree will be fulfilled. This is still Miriam talking. According to the Rashbam, who is Rashi's grandson, she apparently did comment on the dead, according to my husband. She, of course, could have said, because I had a prophecy that 2 of you will raise the Redeemer, because Yocheved was already pregnant with Moshe. People ask on the Rashbam, who says that this is exactly what she said, to answer, certainly it would be better if Moshe was born to married parents. We know Yocheved was already pregnant, right? But it would definitely be better if his parents were married when he was born. Just in general, it's better to have married parents, right? And better to be raised by 2 parents. So Amram listened to Miriam. He stood and remarried his wife, and everyone stood and remarried your wife. and he took. It should have said Chazer, and he brought back to him. Right, but he didn't. So Rabbi Yehuda Bar Zvina said that he made a wedding. He brought her back in a palanquin, which is some sort of like
No, what?
a palanquin. It's like when they're holding you up, you know, when they're carrying you to the chuppah.
On a stretcher.
Yeah, there's an actual word for it, but I can't think of what it is
Okay.
besides your palanquin. But that's what the medrash is translated.
Kohen can't worship
Yes.
them.
Yes, he can't retake his wife later. And so if you ask that question, the Gemara basically says, we only learn from them when they kept the mitzvahs. They weren't obligated to keep the mitzvahs until they received the Torah. And therefore, don't learn from them when they didn't keep the mitzvahs. They only learn when they kept the mitzvahs, do what you will. But yes, you're right. Later on, a Kohen is not allowed to remarry his divorced wife. So, and from this, they bring proof that second marriage is too good a chuppah as well.
Yeah.
From this idea that Amram had a chuppah with Yocheved second time is proof that the chuppahs for second marriage as well. Apparently, there was a question on that in the Gemara. They bring proof from this that yes, you do have second marriages.
The only remembrance of that is in the second marriage. They do it inside. It doesn't have.
Could be.
Ashkenazim who normally do it, but do it inside.
It could be. Not entirely sure. So anyway, so then it continues on to say that Aaron and Miriam danced before her, and the angel said, "The mother of the children is happy." That's the pasuk in Tehillim. So yes, and you know, my husband says, you know, Miriam taught her Aaron to dance. He was only 2. I'm like, that's not really such a big deal. Why not? My nephew, my wedding. Exactly. That's what I said. That's what I said. I said, if you remember our wedding, you know,
Somebody told me that even if a child gets into that, even when the telephone starts, she starts.
Right. Anyways, my husband thought it was like a big deal that she taught him how to dance. I'm like, it's not really a big deal. I said to him, if you remember our wedding, we had one of my great nephews was about 2 and was dancing for us, you know. He had to be coaxed a little bit, but he did do it. So anyways. So Yocheved is 130 years old at this point in time. Specifically, once again, at this point, when Amram takes her back, she's called a daughter of Levi. Why? Mara asked why. Why is she called a daughter, a bat? She's 130 years old. What are you doing calling her a bat? So the explanation is as follows. When she remarried Amram, she became young again. She became rejuvenated. Her wrinkles disappeared. Her hair returned to its original color. I kind of wanted to say black, but I have no idea. It doesn't actually describe what she looked like. She no longer looked her age. Why? Because we don't want Bnei Yisrael to say, Amram only took her back because she's old and can no longer have children, which obviously is a silly thing to say because she just had 2 children only a few years ago. So, but apparently we didn't want Bnei Yisrael.
They would say that they don't have.
Exactly. So we want Bnei Yisrael to take back their wives, no matter their age, because they weren't right to divorce them in the first place. So as a representative said, right, you know, we want them to take back their wives, and it doesn't really matter. They can still have children. They can't. She was able to have children at 130. It's a whole different time in Egypt. You know, they were having 6 children at once, not any issue. In the end, there are at least 3 reasons why she got young. People spoke badly about her because you're not supposed to marry your aunt. A marriage couple formed for her proved the match was from Shemaiah. It's another reason why Miriam was so happy. Proof her parentage was good. Proof that her parentage was good. This is coming from one of the reasons why Miriam was considered to be so happy. Miriam. She took the fact that her parents got remarried and then her mother returned to looking young as proof that her parentage was good. B, this helped hide the birth from the Egyptians. Women show at 3 months unless there's a miraculous rejuvenation. So Amram, that's the second reason. Amram divorced her because it was useless trying to have kids taking her back. An elderly woman would have proved nothing. That was the main reason I cited earlier, that she became young again to prove to Bnei Yisrael that it wasn't just because she was elderly and no longer have children that he took her back. So he rejuvenated so that Bnei Israel should realize that the course of action was to remarry their wives. As we said, the Gemara in Sotah brings down a few different explanations in addition as to why she's called Dara Levi. Could it be that a woman 130 years old is called a bat? As Rabbi Hanina said, this is Yocheved, who was conceived on the way it was born between the walls. The trip was much less than 9 months. We discussed this earlier. As it says, she was born to live in Egypt. At least her birth was in Egypt. Her conception was done in Egypt. Rabbi Yehuda said, signs of youth come to her. Signs of youth come to her. I don't know why specifically this has to do with her being born in Egypt or at the gates or conceived along the way, but this is how the Gemara explains it. Sorry, my husband didn't say any better than that. This is what he sent to me, and this is what I've got. I found this really slightly ridiculous because I thought she'd already had 2 kids only a few years ago. Miriam was only 5. Like, what is this, old woman thing that she couldn't own her children? Normal ways, you'd be right, but she was 130, so nothing was normal. Like, we're living in Mitzrayim. Your wives are having 6 kids at a time. Like, what were they thinking that, like, she could no longer have children just because she was now 130 when 5 years ago she had a daughter, and then 2 years later or 3 years later she had a son. Like, I don't know. I wasn't there. I can't go back in time and find out what they were thinking, but this is what it says. So why does the Torah tell us that she conceived and gave birth to a son when she was already 3 months pregnant? Rabbi Yehuda, son of Zvina, said, to connect the birth to the conception, it comes to teach us that just as the conception was without pain, so too the birth was without pain. Therefore, they weren't affected by the curse of Chava. Because the Gemara then asked, what about the curse of Chava? And it says, from here, we learn that the righteous women are not included with Chava, and then we ask, what about Rivka and Rachel? Rivka and Rachel, their miracle was that they got pregnant, and Rivka also had 2 nations fighting inside of her, and Rachel was cursed by Yaakov. Well, not directly, but indirectly, as we learned, because she took his rachim from her father and hid them, and he said, whoever has taken them shall die painful death, and she died on childbirth, giving birth to Yaakov and his 12 sisters. So back to this decree. What about the decree that all male babies be put to death? How did Yocheved avoid it? So there's a couple of different explanations. Either she gave birth early, some commentators say 3 months early, or because of her rejuvenation. The Egyptians didn't realize she was pregnant until she was actually 6 months along, and they thought she was only 3 months along. And therefore they did not come looking for Moshe until he was 3 months old. So what does she do when the Egyptians come knocking? Up until this point, she's been able to hide Moshe with no problem. At this point, the Egyptians are knocking on the door of the soldiers. She can no longer hide him the way she'd been doing before. So she has this cradle, and she coats it in clay, pitch, and pitch inside and out. It's now become a waterproof cradle. She can put Moshe in it. This is from the Gemara. Now there's a gematria here. We're going to try and explain it. It's a little not so simple, but we're going to try.
What you're gonna say now?
That she covered the cradle in clay and pitch, and also this,
That's from the Torah.
yeah, and this gematria and everything else.
Okay.
So the gematria of clay, which is chamor in Hebrew, chamer, is 248. Okay, now spot, which is pitch, is meant to be 365, but you don't really get that until you take the letters that make up 365 and you spell them out. Shin, samach, and hey equal 365, and therefore they spell out negative. We have to spell the 365 in the letters to make it.
What's the word for pitch?
Zavat.
Zephyr.
Yeah, Zavat.
Zephyr.
Zavat. It does not
No.
equal 365, it equals
No.
487.
The path is already 400.
It equals 487. When we spell out the 365 in letters, it adds up to 487, which is the negative, which is the numerical value of pitch. And this leads to the amount of mitzvahs that we have in the Torah. It's a very complicated gematria. I've done my best to explain
Only
it.
the graph can do it.
It's 248 positive commandments and 365 negative commandments. Make up the mitzvahs we were given in the Torah.
60.
Yes, 365, which is what we get when we take the letters Shin, Samach, and Hey, we get 365, and when we spell out those letters, it adds up to 487, which is what Zavat is, which is what
Zephyr,
Zavat, which is pitch.
Vega, you're saying. Zephyr. You said Shasa, we have, what, it doesn't matter, 365 and 248. Is there, 613, of course, 613 and Zephyr is 7 and Bears, Yachamim,
I think it actually adds up to 486,
487.
47, and then whatever one is off, and it's supposed to be that when you spell out Shin, Samach, and Hey, you get to 487 somehow, or 486. It's one off according to my husband, but you're allowed to do that with gematria.
Okay, whatever.
Yes, this is how men do gematria. They make it work. However, it does. Like,
Yeah, I noticed that.
Okay.
but anyways, the idea is that she covered him in mitzvahs when she hit him. Okay. So according to the Emek Dever, when she could no longer hide him, she saw the guards knocking on the doors of her house. Nevertheless, she did not forsake her trust in Hashgacha Pratis and Kadosh Baruch Hu, and that she distanced him from his place. Like Gemara says, famine in the city, move your feet. Hashgacha and Salah come easier in a hidden way. When things are moving, than when he remains in his place. Okay, that's from the Emek Dever. Or she understood that since the birth was not hidden from those who were looking, it was Hashem's will that he could move to another place. Therefore she took him, but kach lo, for his sake, instead of for herself, she did it for him so he should not strive. Usually we see lech lecha, or she said but oto, and said lo. And so it's funny that she took him for his sake, not for her sake. So what about the reward? What kind of reward does Yocheved get for everything that she's been doing, right? She's the midwife, she davens, she's the mother of the Redeemer, she's the mother of the leader of the woman. Like, what kind of reward is she gonna get? So as reward for her efforts, Hashem returned her son to her, and she was able to nurse him. She was also rewarded with kahuna. In other words, that her descendants would be kohanim, and having a son who would redeem the Jewish people from God's. Okay, there's a medrash that also points out that Basia paid her a little bit for nursing Moshe. Basia paid her for nursing Moshe, just a little bit, but she got a monetary reward also. According to the Chasam Sofer, Yocheved was rewarded with him due to her fear of heaven. She was rewarded with Moshe, okay? And he's going to enslave him. He brings down the following deal in Gemara and Brachos. Moshe said, this is Gemara, how Israel, what does Hashem want from you? Just to fear him. Is fear a small thing? Yes, for Moshe, it was a small thing. Chasam Sofer says the following. Moshe said that the reward for women who fear Hashem was righteous individuals. In Moshe's own eyes, he was small. He wasn't super righteous, so he was reward for fear of heaven, and it must be a small thing. Did you follow that?
I sort of did,
Because he felt that he was a small person, and yet everyone honored him. They all must be super humble, and of course, fear of Hashem is easy when you are super humble. Okay, we're not Moshe Rabbeinu. Fear is not necessarily easy. Fear of heaven, but it is an idea. All right. So she was rewarded with the kahuna, right? Her descendants become the Kohen Gadol. She was rewarded with being the mother of the Redeemers, leaders of Klal Yisrael, Miriam and Moshe. Miriam gets her own reward, which we'll discuss when we do Miriam. Yes, Aaron gets the kahuna, and he gets rewarded with the kahuna, but it's not, that's Yocheved's reward also. Right? So what do we learn from Yocheved? Yocheved had tremendous fear of Hashem. When she learned from her ancestors, she also went above and beyond her caring of the infant. This shows us her chesed. She also placed tremendous faith in the power of tefillah. She davened constantly during her work as a midwife, and she showed consistency in her actions. This is from Rabbi Cohen, Lane Cohen, in her book Woman in Tanakh. She never veered from serving Hashem and fearing. No matter what happened in her life, sitting before Paro, she technically agreed to kill the babies, but in her heart and her mind, she was never gonna kill them. She just didn't want Paro to kill her outright. So she refers to his role as Puna and by being the mother of Moshe Rabbeinu and Miriam and Aaron. This is Yocheved.
יפה מאוד. יפה מאוד. Again, she is the